afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Special Auction Services, our inaugural conversation that we're going to have this evening with a vendor, which is a very great privilege of mine. So I'll introduce Richard in a moment to you. Obviously, a couple of years ago, we sold a collection where I sadly didn't know the vendor, and the Derek Friday sale did very well, and thus why we've got the privilege of selling Richard's collection now as well, and many more to come, hopefully, as well. So the auction tomorrow will start at 11 o'clock. So that's obviously UK time, starting in at 11. What we've got on your screen currently is lot number 0, which is a test lot. This means that you can, if you're registered to bid, you can actually test to make sure that you're functioning, you're working, and that you have the ability to bid live in tomorrow's auction. So we're going to leave that running overnight. Yeah.
No reason why I can't.
I know. See, I mean, I've put it up to 100k, but you never know. Look, 340 is bid.
What's this? The test bid.
This is the test bid. Yeah.
This is.
So there's a couple of people bidding. So thank you very much, as I say, for joining us. I will hand you over now to Richard Adams, who's going to give us an insight and a talk about his time at Bradbury Wilkinson. Obviously, if you've got questions, we'll ask some questions afterwards as well. It's lovely that you guys join us, and obviously you guys online as well. So yeah, give them a quick round of applause and let's say hello to Richard. There you go.
Thank you very much. It's a shame I can't see you.
You can see us.
I'll do my best actually to try and go back a very long way, because I'm conscious of the fact that I'm now in my late 70s, and sadly a lot of my colleagues have long gone, and Derek Friday was, if you like, a sort of a reminder that most of us have got stuff stashed away from when we used to do, well, from my apprenticeship days, companies that I worked before Bradbury Wilkinson. And then, because when Delarue took us over, that was a new chapter. So just on Derek, it's a shame because Derek was a chap that kept himself very much to himself, and but a very wonderful artist. And it's a shame, we knew that he was living with his father and his brother. And I think, yes, you know, the time just caught up with him. When I first met him, he probably was in his late 40s, 50s, but anyway. So he had a good life. We used to have a lot of fun at work, and he used to join in with it. So for me, I was lucky because my brother was an artist, and he was 10 years older. There was two brothers. I was the youngest. I was the third brother, and I used to like the way, or his life, if you like, because he used to bring it home. He had a studio at home, and I thought I want to be an artist too. So when it came to leaving school, if you like, I had the choice of either going to an art college or do an apprenticeship. And I remember having a discussion with him saying, I quite like the idea of an apprenticeship. I get paid, and I can go on to a day release, and that's good. I'm going to get the sort of education into printing. I might be a fine artist like himself, or I don't know what I really wanted at that stage. Anyway, I was offered a sort of part-time job for the summer. I went along there, and it was a studio, and I suddenly realised that the chap that I went to see was offering me an apprenticeship. and he obviously liked what I did, and I got the job, and that was against quite a few other people actually. Anyway, that first job was for Reginald Caulfield's, and that was for doing pottery, metal printing, and paper printing, lots of tin trays, everything for the well, it was for the breweries and distilleries mostly, what you see in pubs. And it's quite amusing now because you go to a pub and quite often you see all these jugs hanging up and you think, gosh, I remember doing that one, you know. And below me, we went to a pub not so long back, way up north, and not only did they have the jugs, but they had the banknotes behind the bar of all different countries. And I thought, well, here we go, I got half the pub here.
Perfect place.
Anyway, so that 5 years was 1968, I think I started. You're in with a group of people, 5 different artists there, that really it was not that long after the war. And looking back now, I realise that some of them did have post-traumatic stress, you know, from the wartime days, because a couple were on edge. They all had interesting jobs during the war. One of them used to do the maps. Another chap used to do all the photography and what have you. So it was a really good grounding for me, because first you got to meet people that had gone through their lives as designers and artists, and there was a lot to learn, and I couldn't have had better tutors. But one of them, who was nearest my age, was Terry Thorne. And Terry had been an apprentice with Belarus, and he used to talk about his time before he had to do national service. And that's what happened to my brother too. He had to go in for national service. And because you come out of that as a changed person, I think it's an antipathy of being an artist, actually, being in a, you know, a squaddy. Anyway, so there you are. So he used to talk about that company, and I was really amazed at what he could do. And he was a good tutor for me, because we were working in gouache, and I was taking the job as a designer, chief designer there. And the thing there was that you've got to do the work very quickly and precisely too. So we had lettering artists, and that was a good grounding for me too, to learn lettering. I think lettering and portraits are sort of the 2 hardest things that you could possibly wish to do in your life. Anyway, the time moved on. Actually, that company was a very well-known institution, if you like. But what happened there is one of the directors went off with one of the best clients and took the business away from the parent company, which is a shame really, because it did destroy Reginald Caulfield's, and that became Wade PDM. And I think people were very familiar with Wade miniatures and what have you. But because that pottery used to do in Burslem, they used to do stuff for porcelain, for if you like, the telephone industry, and as well as all the commercial stuff for the pubs. Anyway, I'll try and hurry along here, because from there I went to British American Tobacco, and that was a different requirement, because we were asking people like Reginald Caulfield to do work that would be suitable for duty-free shops. So not only are we doing the cigarettes in packages, and we've got to make those attractive, and we discovered actually that in British American Tobacco they had a department that concentrated on the packaging itself, whereas we used to do the advertising side of it. So we would do a pack of 20, 50 or whatever, and we would actually put, 555 or State Express, all the different range of cigarettes. We would do them in a different way than the original studio would. And we had some success with that because the sales went way up if we advertised them in a good way. But the thing is, yeah, that caused a few upsets within the industry, of course, in our company. But one of the other bonuses there, that we got to do the calendars, and because what girls to put on. And my colleague, he was Jack the Lad, really, and I think he got a lot out of that. Whereas I was sort of, well, I wasn't that way, put it that way. I mean, I didn't have the Jaguar and all the stuff that goes with it. But anyway, so I was getting a little bit fed up though, going up to London. I used to go up there by motorcycle, which is another story. And I remember them being train strikes and things, and it was terrible getting up to London. Anyway.
Nothing's changed then.
Nothing changes, no, nothing changes. It gets even worse now, I'm sure. So from there, what happened is that Terry went back into the banknote business, and he went to Bradbury Wilkinson, and 3 years went past, I believe, when I was at the cigarette place, and he said, they're looking for another designer. He said, you ought to go for it. Well, because in those days, the unions played their part. You had to be part of the union, and I was in Slade, as it was known then. And so what happened there is that you could go there for an interview one at a time, if you like. So I had the ability to go there, and whatever, got the date. And I went along, and as it happened, it wasn't that far from where we lived, about 8 miles away. Well, that was a plus, I thought, except I didn't realise that the traffic was stationary down there as well, Anyway, I went along to this place, never been that way, really. I wasn't familiar with New Malden, really it's Merton. And this place was amazing. It had a big black fence round and, if you like, big gates. And you had to sort of pull the bell. The chap would come out in a, looked like policeman, security. Got out his sort of big folder and said, oh, Mr. Adams, yes, I come for an interview, Oh, well, it's over there. And you had to walk through the park to get to the front door. You went up the steps and you entered. Well, it could have been a hospital or something, because looking on the floor, you've got a mosaic, Bradbury Wilkinson, and the desk in front of you with all these officers there. And right, you come for an interview, and off I went. And I met the head of security there. Well, there was about 3 people that interviewed me, and you laid out your work, and they went through it, and they said, oh, okay, so what medium do you prefer? And I said, well, it's gouache, really. I do some airbrushing. But actually, at the cigarette company, it was felt pens, because we had to come up with ideas and dash them off and then that visual would go to a studio, and we'd have a big account with a studio, and we spent a lot of money that way, because those guys had to then draw up what you had visualised in fairly quick time, and sometimes I gave them a hard job, you know. Other times it might have been easier, but for us, speed was the essence. So felt pens was immediate. You know, you'd be doing 2 or 3 sort of ideas in the morning, and then in the afternoon you'd have to come up with some other ideas. So they were interested in that, but they were very concerned that, you know, you're doing speed, are you? You know, so you felt pens. We don't do felt pens. What we do is precise drawings. And can you work in watercolour? And I thought, well, yeah, I've done watercolour when I was a student, but not concurrent, no, because it's gouache paint, or, you know, for my quieter work, if you like. But anyway, they said, well, we'll take you on. You've got a 3-month probationary period, see how you go. And so I went back to tell my parents, you know, I've got this job, I've got an offer. It looks interesting though. Building's ever so old. And it's a strange place because it's got a park and what have you. Anyway, so when I went the next time, for the first week, I think I was taken around every department. And when you went through the office along the bottom, upstairs is what was called the prelims, and that's where all the origination was done. And the studio wasn't a studio, it was a big long corridor, and everybody sat looking at the window, obviously, in a cutout desk, and you actually sat with a desk about that height, so you could get close to the work. And so as you come down from there, and you went into the factory at the back, or the printing side of things, that was just a different world. Noisy, obviously, but the machines are as tall as this room. You're looking at about 16, or well, this room's about 14 foot high. So some of these machines towered above you, all thundering away. And bearing in mind, this was in the 70s, there was a lot of sort of sacking. What's all this sacking for? You know, well, that's for the intaglio printing. That wipes the rollers to clear the ink. Really? Okay. And then you walk down to another department, and different again, different machines, and this goes on forever. You get lost. It's a real complex. But then you enter another part where you're confronted with about, well, 600 or 700 workers going through stacks of piles of printed banknotes, and they're just going flipping through it. Amazing. Guillotining, another thing, which is amazing. Yeah, it's wonderful, really. I mean, they had a medical centre, which you need, because it's one of the most dangerous jobs with paper, all the paper cuts and whatever you can get. There was the canteen, which was enormous, but very old-fashioned. Then there was the place where all the electricity made, all the consoles for the cameras. Yeah, just amazing. Anyway, back on where I was going to work, a lot quieter, of course, but you've got so many different departments there. One thing that struck me was the use of these big old Albion presses, you know, like Caxton used, great big levers and whatever, printing. Gosh, you know, why would they, anyway. And then you went into a photographic department, and the cameras then were running on rails. You know, they had a big long bellows, could go on for about 12 foot long, with the image at the front, all reduced down. Amazing. Then you went to another room where sort of metal was being dipped and cleaned, actually. You went to metal plate finishing departments where they would be preparing the steel plates for the engravers. Then you'd get eventually to where the transfer presses were, and they were spectacular. They were big machines with big wheels, big stars, which the operator would hold, and the idea was that you could roll from an impression off a plate and transfer it onto another plate very precisely using the wheel to turn. So there was a lot to learn, and you was aware that people in that industry had been there in their apprenticeship for 5 years as a minimum, or 7 years if you was an engraver, and it was really probably about 10 or 12, maybe 15 years before you become really proficient. And also some of the people that you met, you almost sort of, well, you knew that they were somebody of note, you know, and it was just amazing the work that they were doing. They would be working on an image which was the size of a stamp, you know, with their glass, one of these, and they'd be looking down on it, and you learn to use this very quickly, you know. You have to come right up to see what you're looking at. So there was a lot of new things for me to take on. But then, you know, as years went by, I'd become part of that. I took my first sort of steps, if you like. They gave us a lot of stamps to do. That was a good way of getting into things. We also did passports, bonds, share certificates, and there was a lot of helping out different people. If you were given one side to do, that was quite sufficient. That would take you about 3 or 4 weeks to come up with ideas, perhaps. If you was given a set, then you're talking about 10 sides. You know, you've got 5 fronts, 5 backs, and then you've got to go through all the different parameters. How big the note is, how many printings it's going to be, how many invisible printings you're going to have, what special inks, you know, and what sort of colours, what we're going to do this time that we've done that's different from before, and what's the idea behind this set of notes in the first place. Is it because it's a new president, or is it because they've got a new industry? You know, they might be going into very proud of their nuclear industries, perhaps, or you know, it might be agriculture, or it might be tourism. All these sort of things you've got to consider. How the work was given to us was via salesmen. And the salesman would go into the office, and there'd be a big discussion as to who might be the best designer to give this work to. You know, if we're talking about an African country, some of us are very good at the African. We had a sort of a yen for that, or if it's Islamic or something like that, that's a completely different ball game, really. And then, of course, you've got the European countries. We were doing Luxembourg and well, not Italy, but all different countries anyway. So, going back to how the work was given to us, we had what was called a sales preliminary order. And on that document, which would be many pages, it lay out the sizes, the numbering requirements, the ink requirements, and then there'll be a section of what they might think would be a good idea in the way of the pictures. You know, are you going to do something that was on their flora or fauna, or is it going to be industry or whatever? And then more importantly, whose portrait was going to be on it, because the portraits were quite, well, that could make or break it, the note, you know. If it was a good portrait, and you'd have to do a portrait that would fit on each one, because if you had such a difference in size, you have to do so many different portraits at different sizes. You couldn't reduce things, they had to be drawn for that specific size. And the other thing is, of course, is that we were working to create a note at actual size with all the correct patterns on it that were going to be on the finished article. You are actually doing the model for the whole print range, which is pretty amazing. It wasn't until I thought about it the other day that I suppose in my time, my work's been amongst, I don't know, fifth of the nation, I should think, of the entire population. Just mind-boggling, really, but we were printing for upwards of 150 countries, which was quite amazing, really. And it all came out of that New Malvern company. And because we had competition, and so you was very aware of that, Delarue were always our main competitor, but there were also others. There was Dutch companies and the German companies, yeah. So I could talk about each note if you like, but I don't know.
I'm just a bit conscious of time. Do you want to take a few questions? Is that
might be
something
an
we could
idea?
do? And then
Yeah.
if anyone's got anything specific interest to ask, yeah, Andrew does. I know he's busting.
No, actually, pretty much on your last point, it's something I've always wondered about, because in my work I've come across different designs from different companies for clearly the same note. They've been given the same brief. So for example, for Mozambique, I've seen one for a 1950s design, which slightly predates you, but I imagine it's a similar situation.
Yeah.
Where they've got the same elements on, and the same colour note, but done slightly differently. So were you given quite detailed instructions about what was to put on there, or was that different between countries?
Right. Well, this would come down to the salesman, really.
Right.
He didn't have knowledge of that. I think the way the company worked is they had like embedded people that they used to go to. So one of the things, of course, is what countries you're talking about. If it's Mozambique, would that be French speaking? Portuguese. Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
Now that's interesting, because we had one salesman that could speak Portuguese.
Right.
French was more common,
Right.
but Portuguese was quite difficult, and it's a different language, you know, apparently. So you've got to bear in mind that we probably had, I suppose, 10 travellers or salesmen, and they would have pretty good knowledge on their patch.
Yeah.
So if he was a Portuguese speaker, then he's going to gravitate to all that. Yeah.
Of course.
So what country was it again?
It was for Mozambique.
Oh, Mozambique.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, and
I've seen
so
others
someone
too, yeah.
else has got sniff that they wanted more notes,
This
or
was
a
a
new
Waterloo
issue was.
design.
Yeah.
This was a Waterloo design and a Bradbury design.
Okay.
Almost the same, but fundamentally
Right.
different. Yeah.
There's probably a lot of backhanders as well, I imagine. So,
Mozambique.
it's cash, isn't it?
Well, the way it worked, the central bank of Mozambique
Yes.
would put it out to tender.
Yeah.
And so they'd look at all the different companies. They might look at Inskaday, they might look at Delarue's, Bradbury Wilkinson, and they'd play each other off, of course, to get a good price or get the price down.
Yeah.
Now, what happened, of course, is that Brad's might be full up with work. Delarue might be after it,
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we like to keep a country. If we got in there
Yeah.
early, we moved heaven and earth to keep that country.
Yeah.
So I think what happened there in that case is that it went out to tender and both came up with different designs.
Yeah.
Now we wouldn't see what the others were
Mhm.
doing, but what we would, to be fair to us and to our competition, is that we're not doing something dissimilar.
Yeah.
I mean, the brief should be the brief. So
Yeah.
yeah, if it's
It
going to
was
be about
astonishingly
tourism,
good. Yeah.
we'll have a take on it, and they will have a take on
Of
it.
course.
And then it's really down to, do they like our notes in preference to theirs?
And money as well. I
And then
imagine,
it comes down to the cost.
Yeah.
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 And quite
And
often we would lose it, not by having the worst or the best note, just purely on cost.
Yeah.
We've seen plenty of cases where it's a far nicer design that wasn't
Yeah,
produced,
it wasn't
actually,
used, yeah.
and we thought it must just be the cost.
I know on one occasion, we got to see the competition's notes. Now that was really naughty, but I'm not sure how much was paid there. Yeah.
Anyone else got any other questions you want to ask Richard? Why is it?
Oh, right.
Ted?
Was there any particular subject matter you preferred designing, or was it all work, if you will? Like, was there something whether it be transport, flora and fauna, buildings, people, what was your particular interest?
I think we tackle everything.
Mm.
It was quite enjoyable to do animals or perhaps a factory scene or something. But some stuff could be quite arduous, if it was steelworks or something, or a cathedral, how many windows do you have to get right, Yeah, I think, and also the portraits, some of the portraits were really difficult. You had to try and capture that character in that person, you know what it's like when you look at all the different queens' portraits that they are, and you think, okay, that was when she was 30, that was when she was coming into her 40s, you can understand the differences. But to get the likeness, that was the issue. You really had to capture it like a caricature. And it was always great if you had someone that was really hairy,
Slap it on.
Yeah, well, it was interesting.
Was the paper all the same across the board for all the 150 countries?
Right, the paper was a big issue, I think. Portals would do the paper side of things. We would buy from Portals, and so would Delarue.
Yeah.
So there were quite a few paper, there's Tumberbrook used to do paper, there's different paper producers. And I guess that some of the companies sort of would gravitate to one supplier more than another. You've got Crane, American stuff. I mean, I know I'm talking to people that know what they're talking about, but you've got to remember it is all cotton produced. The paper is made from cotton, and so it's not a wood chip product or anything. And then the papers, I mean, I'm not an expert on papers, but there'll be different thicknesses. You could introduce different elements into the paper. Cotton was used because of the fibres being so strong and long. But the thing is that you needed a paper that was UV, what would it be? Not bright, you know, dull, UV dull. The reason for that is that when you put it through under a UV light, you don't want the paper squaring up. You want any printing that you could print in UV.
So was that
to
the
show up.
paper people who did that with the black, who made the?
Yeah, the paper side of it, they would put in the threads.
You didn't treat the paper when it arrived, so when you put the
Well,
UV light, it didn't react to
that is a printing.
That's the printing.
That's a letterpress printing if you put an image on it. But if you're talking about the paper itself, integrity, that would be dull, if you like.
Yeah.
It had to be a dull background, you know. And then.
So like an off-white, to react to the nanometer of the
Yeah.
long wave UV.
Correct.
He loves a UV.
I love a
He
UV.
does that. Robbie, have you got any questions that you want to ask?
But you could put in the paper.
Yeah, I
you
have
could
one.
put-
Yeah, that's nice, though.
you know, planchettes and all sorts.
Have you got a favourite project while you were at Brad's in terms of like when you did all the design, it felt amazing, and then they went out and they got produced?
Oh well, yeah. I think you were proud of some issues,
Yeah, I can imagine.
and you was a bit aghast about some of the others.
I think the question is, which one did you feel you got away in a coach from?
Yeah, there's two questions there.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, sometimes you bumped along, life, and other times you was really into it. Depends how you felt on the day, isn't it?
No, yeah.
And also, what's going on in your life?
Which one? What one would think of one that worked well?
Well, I tend to think that the early ones, that when I look back on, I think I could have done better than that. I really could have done better than that. And then some of the later ones you're quite proud of, and I think that's going to be like everything, isn't it? I'm sure if you're a car designer and there's special cars that actually worked, and there's special banknotes that actually worked. What I will say is that looking at, in my collection, and you look back at the historic notes, I look at them in two ways. First of all, they do represent what we consider as banknotes. They've got all the minutiae and the work that's gone into them is just incredible. When you get into my time and up to date, I think you're into a different area. First of all, they're colourful. They've got more and more colourful, and I think even nowadays they're even more colourful than when I used to do them. It used to be the thing where you had to have I'm going to get this wrong. Is it the £10 note used to be red? £1 was green, and that was identification. And that was important with the US dollars. I mean, they've kept their notes very well. They just don't change. The reason for that, of course, is that the dollar is used all over the world. And if they change, then that causes problems. But I see that they are changing now, gradually. Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone else? No?
I think just thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Give,
I'm sorry if I
You
mean,
didn't waffle on, you were great.
I'm having to think back
a little while.
many years, and I'm going back into something I've almost forgotten.
Yeah. Well, no,
You
that's fair
know,
enough.
so had you have asked me these sort of questions in my heyday, I
Sue?
could
You remember that?
have,
What
Jill,
got
do you
to
remember?
say? Jill?
well, probably been much more intelligible.
Probably.
Anyway.
Well, thank you, Richard. Give him a round of applause. No, you stay here with me for a moment. So, for those of you online, thank you very much for participating. You can keep bidding on your test lot. We'll see where we get to in the morning. We'll turn it off about 5 minutes before the sale. So most of you, I think, are registered to bid, which is great. But the only thing you just need to be thinking about is postage and packaging. For some things are going to be a bit tricky, so we might have to help us organise that. For you guys that have come along, thank you very much. It's been lovely having you here. Obviously, tomorrow we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a very interesting day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank you
good
very
day.
much, Richard. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow morning from 11 o'clock for your bidding. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, no, thank you for coming.